You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Icons, where listeners are introduced to incredible people working within the law enforcement community who have made a profound impact in our world. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice.
On this episode of Icons, we're joined by one of our very own, Charles Humphrey, who is one of the museum's simulator instructors. Charles is joined by his daughter, Courtney, who will be acting as the guest host on today's episode. They will discuss Charles's law enforcement career, which has spanned more than 40 years, most of which was spent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, otherwise known as the ATF. He worked as a certified firearms instructor, explosives expert, and took part in many undercover operations. Charles and Courtney discussed the many challenges of being in law enforcement and raising a family, in addition to him keeping his work and personal life separate. They both swap stories and reflect on how this dynamic has evolved between father and daughter over the years, and what it means to Courtney to have a father in law enforcement. And now for Icons, featuring Charles and Courtney Humphrey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Humphrey. I'm here interviewing my father, Charles Humphrey, who is a instructor here at the Law Enforcement Memorial Museum. Hey, Dad.
How you doing, Courtney?
I'm good. How are you?
We're fine. Doing well.
Good. Well, we're here. I'm interviewing him today, just asking him some questions about his career. I am 28 years old, so I've seen a lot growing up. Shocking, right, Dad? I'm almost 30. But I've seen a lot throughout his career, so I want to take some time to just walk down memory lane with you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great. So one thing I want to know is what necessarily inspired you to pursue a career in law enforcement?
I don't know if I pursued a career in law enforcement, more so the law enforcement profession pursued me. It was so almost like a calling, so to speak. I mean, I grew up in the tumultuous 60s civil rights era. I remember seeing violence and crime and those kind of things shortly after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so all my career, I just felt a passion towards serving people and protecting people. And somehow that kind of went from that point to when I was in college. I started majoring in criminal justice, and I just felt this urging to want to serve and protect people. That's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, that's cool, Dad. So can you kind of outline for us like what your career looked like, such as the different jobs and roles you've had throughout the years? Because it's been, 40 years of
I'll be 43
career.
this year.
Yeah.
I started my career in corrections after I graduated from college, Long Island University in New York. And my first position was working in corrections here in Maryland there, D.C. area. And throughout college, I thought that the best solution to address the crime issue was to rehabilitate people. I went to a liberal arts school. Everything was very rehabilitate individuals instead of incarcerating and warehousing people. So I did that for 3 years, and which is a good experience because everything I thought I knew about jails and prisons were all true. People, whatever you think goes on in these institutions, all happened. So it was a very eye-opening experience. I think I'd been on the job maybe 2 weeks, and I'm walking through one of the cell blocks, and I hear people calling my name. I'm thinking, wait a minute, who knows me here
Right.
in the county jail? I mean, I turned around, and I'm seeing faces of people I knew growing up and going to school. And, you see people, you think that person is going to have a life of nothing good happening in their life of crime. They always got in trouble in school, fights, drug issues, violence, shoplifting. And I turned around, I'm looking at these individuals, and it all came full circle. I said, I saw this coming. And so it was just challenging, seeing people that incarcerated. And then I went from there. I applied for a job with the U.S. Secret Service, And thought that was, hey, this is big time.
That's cool.
It was cool. You're right, the president, working at the White House, other things, traveling with the president. So that was very, very good. And the training with the Secret Service was certainly one of the best opportunities that I've ever experienced. Yes, I mean, they emphasize you can go work out on your own government time. I chose the path of going to the gun range, and I became very, very proficient with firearms training. I was an expert in firearms training, and just traveling around with the president and going to these details and campaigns, this kind of thing. So, and then I met an individual who worked for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms. It was ATF back then. And he talked about some of the things they were doing investigatively and some of the other opportunities that you can experience being an ATF agent. So I applied for ATF, and I started a career that took me for 26 years.
Yeah, that's cool. Mm-hmm. I know we moved a lot with that job. Well, before I was born, we were in Nashville. Then I was born in Maryland. Then you moved to Philly and New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So we've been all over the place with that one. But do you feel like your career would look differently if you were not Black?
I've always looked at it from a perspective that before I was in law enforcement, I'm a Black man in America. But all the challenges that you see on the news about some of the things that go on, I try not to let that interfere with my career because I was there to protect individuals, serve the public, those kind of things. But I know that there was no role models in my family in law enforcement. I had no mentors, no one. I was the first person in my family that I'm aware of that pursued a career in law enforcement, to the point my own dad said, what are you doing? I mean, so I want you to go to law school. Because I had a sort of proclivity towards debates and talking a lot.
I wonder where I got that from.
Yeah, right. You sort of adopted that from me. So,
yeah, that's cool. Do you think that knowing that you're a Black man first, but for a lot of people in the law enforcement community, their jobs become like who they are. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like because you're a Black person first, you may have had different experiences being in the law enforcement career that might have either taken you places or blocked you from different opportunities?
I don't think it inhibited me at all. I mean, I think you and I have spoken several times. If I am stopped by the police for traffic violation, speeding, whatever, I'm always cognizant of the fact that that officer stopping me doesn't know me from as a law enforcement officer. So I will, just respectfully identify myself, and I may say, excuse me, I want you to know that I'm a law enforcement officer and I'm probably armed, if I wasn't armed at the time. But in terms of not seeing a lot of people like me, people of color in law enforcement, I was always aware of some of the challenges that you face in law enforcement as a Black man and as a Black law enforcement officer. But I don't think that ever prevented me from doing the job that I think I was called to do.
We're 3 years now into the pandemic, so I know that's kind of changed a lot. The world is having eye-opening or awakening moments to what can go on in situations. And I know particularly there's been a lot of impact within the Black community. Right now we're sitting and watching the Tyree Nichols situation unfold. So I want to know your thoughts about the relationship that one has as a law enforcement officer with the Black community, and also vice versa, because our family's Black. We have, on your side of the family, have nothing but male cousins, who I think about more often now than I ever probably should have or would have in the past. So the question is, what are your thoughts about the relationship between the Black community and law enforcement?
I think it's a challenge. There's been a lot of incidents where Blacks have been disproportionately the victim of wrongdoing. I know the George Floyd case, now with the Tyree Nichols case. There's a lot of mistrust. I think it's a cultural thing even above and beyond a racial thing, because you have a lot of black law enforcement officers who sometimes are so ingrained in that culture. Police are protected by other individuals, even black or white. So it's a problem. Again, a lot of black youth don't look positively towards law enforcement officers, either black or white.
Yeah. I know you've been like super outspoken about like policy changes and like adjustments, hiring practices, literally all of it I can think of. We've talked extensively about that because I also followed your footsteps and studied criminal justice. So I always come to you looking for debates on these topics. But I know that you believe that we need in law enforcement like a deeper conversation. So if you were to have that conversation, like what would you want to talk about? Like what would you want the impact of that conversation to be?
I think it starts from, in law enforcement, as you mentioned, the hiring practices. Some people never should be in law enforcement to begin with. People who abuse and misuse their authority. I mean, law enforcement is unique because you have a lot of power, authority. You can stop people, you can interview people, you can arrest people, you can do a variety of different things. And with that responsibility comes accountability. They really should do a better job in screening individuals because, again, some people should not be in law enforcement. So I call them infiltrators because I know what drove me to a career in law enforcement. I wasn't pursuing power and authority of individuals or depriving someone of their constitutional rights. I was here to serve and help people. I'm saying, why can't we find more people like myself who are really passionate about making the streets safe, ridding our streets of gang violence and drugs. Now this big thing about fentanyl. Who's putting this poison out in the streets kids, young kids. Fentanyl looks like candy now. So it's crazy. But it takes a certain mindset, a maturity, and responsibility to be in law enforcement to begin with.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know like the usage of body cameras was like a huge thing that we all thought was a solution to a problem. And perhaps it's missing marks there because we're seeing body camera footage that's not really, not to say it's not used beneficially, but because it is. But for some situations, it hasn't been like, not the nail in the coffin, but like the period at the end of the sentence. Like we're watching this footage, this outcome should be what we're thinking about, but is oftentimes not. So I know body cameras was a good policy push. Do you think there are other policies that we could potentially be thinking about or maybe not thinking about right now that could change some of the outcomes of these situations that we're seeing in the news?
Well, let me just address the body camera issue. First of all, I think body cameras are good. I'm a proponent of body cameras, but my thoughts on body cameras only shows one myopic view of what happened. And I teach in my Forceology 101 class here at the museum that it's incumbent upon an officer to articulate what they saw. I always use the analogy in my Forceology 101 class that if you watch sports, for example, football, it was a controversial play on the field, and they'll say, well, they'll have a challenge flag, and there's different body cameras from different angles looking at the same incident, and sometimes they can't conclusively determine what happened on the field. So I think body cameras are good, but body cameras also can't capture the thoughts in the mind of the officer that officer can use force if they perceive imminent danger of serious bodily injury or death to the officer or someone else. Body camera can't capture that. So the officer has to articulate why they use that level of force and fill in the gaps, so to speak. But body cameras are good. Yeah.
So I know, and this is another place we've had debates about just like, you see things differently because you came from law enforcement. This has been your life and career for 40 plus years. And as a 28-year-old, I know I've missed a lot of your career and what has transpired there. But coming from your background, and I know you have a good amount of friends and colleagues that are still in the field or just recently retired. I know you're having conversations about their thoughts about the law enforcement community as it stands. So what are some of the things you all have been talking about? I know I've heard that, people are afraid to be in law enforcement because there's always like that eye that's looking at you, or there's that kind of a prejudgment when someone says, "Oh, I'm a cop," and they're like, "Oh, well." So is that something that people are like thinking about or are afraid of right now?
Yeah, it's a lot of negative perceptions about law enforcement. One thing, law enforcement officers are being asked to do a lot of things now. Enforce the law, be public health officials, mental health counselors, a variety of different things. So the policing aspect of it has shifted. There's been a paradigm shift in law enforcement because, again, as I teach in my Force Psychology 101 class here at the National Law Enforcement Museum, that it's common for officers to interact with someone who has a mental health issue. Officers really not prepared to address a lot of these mental health issues. A person can be suicidal, have dementia, substance abuse, Alzheimer's, autism, and officers are not really properly trained to address a lot of these issues. So I talked to a lot of my friends who are afraid. As a matter of fact, I call it my Zachary Project. I have a cousin, a family member, who has an autistic son. He's afraid his son may encounter law enforcement, and autistic individuals aren't necessarily non-compliant. Sometimes they're nonverbal. They have very unpredictable behavior patterns. He's afraid his son may interact with law enforcement, and he starts exhibiting some of the characteristics, swinging their arms and their fight or flight, may try to run. Officers could perceive that as being a threat. His son could be harmed. So I get a lot of those questions from my colleagues and friends. Try to put me in situations that, what do you think we should do? I mean, I spoke with another individual who has a young black son who's afraid his son may get stopped by the police, and some of these other outcomes that we've seen in the news. And I said, look, there's a pouch you can buy. You open it up, you put your proof of insurance, registration, and your driver's license, and you stick it on top of the car, and you put your hands on the steering wheel, look straight ahead, and roll the window down, say, "Officer, my dad told me if I ever get stopped by the police, everything you need for this stop is on top of the car." So black families are finding themselves having to provide additional instructions to their black sons and daughters to protect them, because they want them to come home, because they fear that any interaction with law enforcement could potentially have a bad outcome. So you find black families are preparing their young sons and daughters for confrontation with law enforcement. And so it's a different conversation altogether.
Yeah, you actually touched on something that like sits in my heart every day, and it's a conversation that black families have to have with their children. So I know the other day we were just talking about how if I were to be 8 or 9 years old, we would have already been having conversations about interactions with the police, and, don't look like you're touching a lot of stuff in the mall, and, don't draw too much attention to yourself. So I want to talk about that. We've seen a lot of bad relationships between guns and children, school shootings, children having to have earlier conversations about gun violence, drug use, police interactions. So all in all, like, as a black man who raised 4 daughters, I would say successfully, what are your thoughts about black families now having to have those conversations that you would call, mature now, for a kid who can probably barely do their multiplication tables? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
You referring to the case where the kid had access to his gun?
Yeah, there's just a kid just brought a gun to a school and shot a teacher,
right, exactly.
like a month ago, I want to say. So I know there's a lot of child shootings. I hate to even have to put those two words together, that have happened recently. And I know there's a parallel between gun violence in children, and then also families having to prepare their kids to have those conversations sooner rather than later.
Right. I mean, with the in light of all the school shootings we've had in recent years, Columbine, other school shootings,
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook. I mean, it's been crazy. So it's not just probably in the black families you have to have this conversation, because all families have these conversations, and they're recognizing, identifying a lot of younger kids are having mental health issues now because the challenges that kids face these days. And there's bullying, cyberbullying, bullying in school. Kids coming to school and they're been picked on, whatever. So to retaliate, protect them. Now there's more ways. Even when I was a kid, you and another kid would be bullied. You got into a fight, and that was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. Now people can hide behind computers, cyberbullying, or the other forms of harassment and bullying, that kind of thing. So kids have different challenges, so they have to protect themselves. So our kids, do they know where their parents keep their guns, bring them to school, or parents allowing the kids to have access to their guns? You know, in our home, you don't know where I keep my guns.
No,
I have guns all over the place. You've never seen a gun. And maybe you see me cleaning my gun if I come back from the range.
Right.
But after that, you never know. None of my daughters, you and the other 3 sisters, don't know where I keep my guns.
That's true. Even that's a conversation. Like when you are cleaning your guns, it's a very much so, leave dad to his space, because, you just don't want anything. And you're safe, so it's not, we're not scared something would happen, but it's always just like, that's a you thing and this is your space. And those moments are supposed to be secure, and you do them in a secure setting. So we oftentimes leave you alone when you're, cleaning out your arsenal there. But getting into that conversation about how you raised us, I would say that there was a reason why I chose to study criminal justice. And I think a lot of our conversations when I was a little kid were always about understanding how the human brain works. And I feel like that's a huge part of the criminology side of the criminal justice field. And that's always intrigued me. I'm a people person, just like you are. So in always being someone who wants to be around people, you have to also understand them. So in that line of thinking there, what are your thoughts around people pursuing criminology or criminal justice as a major or as a focus while they're in school?
I get asked that question a lot. You think my son should major in criminal justice, criminology? I says no. I think the push now is, I said, let's look at what's happening in the world. Homeland security is a big field. Cybersecurity, those areas. Criminal justice is fine if you want to pursue a career in law enforcement. It gives you an idea and understanding of the criminal mind. It does help you understand. But I think it's up to you really what you want to do with it. Because again, I majored in criminal justice, but what I learned in college certainly didn't prepare me for a lot of things I'm seeing now in law enforcement, have seen in law enforcement in my career, my 43-year career in law enforcement.
Gotcha. So now, going back to our family, how do you think having this career impacted like our family life? I know earlier I mentioned we moved a lot. Mm-hmm. There's a, give dad his space. There's that conversation. And then also one thing is our house is super secure. So I'm like, I want to talk about like how having 4 Black daughters, how your career impacted raising us, and also mom too. One
of my biggest regrets, and I've talked about this extensively, is that I spent a lot of time away. Working long hours, weekends, I travel a lot, and to a point I wanted to make sure when I came home that I didn't bring the job with me. I want to give you all 100% of my time, my effort. I didn't talk about cases. I always say law enforcement or my career is what I did. It's not who I am. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a provider, and I don't want you all to grow up knowing the kind of things or the dangers that I was facing. I'm ATF. The reason why we knock on the bad guy's door, because we know the bad guy has guns and drugs and other types of things. I used to buy drugs and guns undercover, and I didn't want you all to feel a sense of panic or worry. That's why when I came home, it was all about daddy-daughter. We did daddy-daughter dates.
Still do.
Still do to this day, So, and I didn't want you all to feel, I didn't want any spillover from what I was doing in my career in law enforcement to a point where you all felt threatened or we had a routine. We go someplace, and if I see somebody that I maybe potentially had arrested or had worked undercover with, we had a routine. I would tell your mom, you guys get in the car and you drive off, make different turns, and I'll call the office and have one of the agents come pick me up, kind of thing. We had a routine.
Never knew that.
So that was our routine. So, and you always know that we walk in the restaurant where Dad needs to sit with his back against the wall, facing the door. He had certain protocols. But beyond that, I just didn't want you all to feel that you all were second to my career. I wanted you all to know that you were my first priority. Again, you go out to dinner or out to lunch with a bunch of law enforcement guys, and all they talk about is a job.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I never did that. With my family, we talk about family things, how you doing in school, your music career. I didn't come home talking about who I busted that day or any of that. So, no.
Yeah, that's very true. So I know just between like you and I, like I said, I followed your footsteps up to a point. I finished my degree at Maryland in 2016, but I did not go into law enforcement because up until then I was like, yep, Dad, ATF or Secret Service. Like I was literally going to repeat your career path, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I know it's not something you've like ever held against me because there was a reason why I pivoted. I think one thing you highlighted earlier is that your purpose was protection and a servant mindset and serving your community. And I went to the second one, the serving the community piece. I did a lot of nonprofit work and working with people. So I wanted to say this to you now is that growing up, I never literally had a negative association with law enforcement or police officers. Like some of your best guy friends were cops growing up. And some of my friends' fathers were cops too. And I never had that negative association. So I just have to say that it is actually very hard to live in the current state of the world right now where that is not the case. And it's not that I have a disdain for law enforcement. I will always love and respect what you did in your field, in your career, and all the colleagues that you've had because it's impacted my life in such a positive way. But what makes me feel differently is that I now have to worry about you too when you leave the house. Because you are a Black man first and you're not like a small person, you're huge. So it's like, you're a big personality, you're a big guy. So it's like, no one knows that until they talk to you. Within seconds of talking to you, oh, this guy's so warm. Like you can get that, but a lot of people don't get to that point because they let that fear kind of hold them back from approaching you for a conversation or asking you for help. So it's hard. I will have to say, Dad, having to think about you when growing up, all you did was think about me, like leaving the house and being around friends and like teaching me how to navigate relationships and talking to boys, like the fun stuff, of growing up. So now that you're retired and this is not what you do anymore, I just have to say I'm scared. I don't know if I've ever told you that I'm scared. I'm scared for your life when you leave the house sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I can sense that, you know how guarded and protective I am with my family and you guys. You guys were kids, well, Dad, can I go over to Susie's house? Well, who's Susie and who are Mom and Dad? And let me go meet them.
What do they do?
What do they do? Because I can't be with you at all times, but I can make sure that you have yourself in an environment where I can connect to, I can respond to quickly. You travel a lot. Only thing I ask you is, Courtney, just send me a text. Let me know you're okay. You reached your destination. That's all you need to know. When I lay my head on my pillow, I can have a sense of comfort that you're in a safe environment. And in case of emergency, I can respond quickly. That was my criteria. Because I know that you all had these feelings about, I can sense that you all were afraid. I would leave home sometime. I guess you guys started crying, whatever, for other reasons. But I know you were afraid that I would be gone and not come home. And, a lot of officers have been killed, as I say in my Forestology 101 class. across the street, there are 23,229 names of officers who were killed in the line of duty. So use of force was used against them. I don't want anyone's name to be etched on that wall, including my own. So that's why I'm very passionate about what I do here at the National Law Enforcement Museum, my Forceology 101 class, to make sure people understand this is not about, I tell people, this is not a cop shop. What I do here is not a video game. I'm trying to provide an experience, what it's like to walk in the shoes of officers who have to make a split-second decision. So people can criticize law enforcement officers who misuse and abuse their authority and positioning, but there are a lot of good officers who are doing the job. Sometimes they just make bad decisions. No intent to harm or abuse their authority, but it's a lot that goes into, even the Supreme Court recognizes officers that make split-second decisions. But at the time officer uses force, was it reasonable based upon the facts and circumstances known to the officer at that time? Officer may perceive a person going behind their back, that person is armed, person poses imminent danger to that officer. Now it comes out the fact to be that the person has a bottle of water or a cell phone. Officer discharges a weapon. People are going to say the officer should not have shot the person because the person had a bottle of water or a cell phone. But was it reasonable for the officer to fear their safety? Yes. They, of course, understand. You watch the news, ask yourself this question. Was the officer's use of force, was it reasonable?
Yeah. I think people often hear like, oh, the person was shot, and they automatically jump to unreasonable. But I can definitely echo, it's hard to put yourself in that.
That's why body cameras sometimes only show, again, one myopic view of what happened. Maybe it's somebody with a different angle, sees a person going in their waistband to retrieve a weapon, but the body camera from behind a person doesn't show that. Mm-hmm. So, but if an officer can articulate that they feared their safety, and was their use of force, was it reasonable? So that's to be considered.
Yeah. So last few questions here. In your 40 plus years in law enforcement, what has been one of the most memorable experiences that you've had while you were in the field? Because I know you did Vice, you've done quite a bit. That kind of scares me.
Yeah, this is one, I always remember this. When I was working in Trenton, New Jersey, we did a big, huge roundup. I mean, in that part of New Jersey, near the shore, Wall, New Jersey, Monmouth County, did a big, huge roundup. I mean, it must have been, 60 targets. And we had a big roundup. We took down this one particular area in New Jersey. In a 7 square mile radius, they had the shootings all the time. Every night, pop, 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 gunfire. We rounded up most of those 60 suspects, arrested them. We had a big staging area. We arrested them, put them in the staging area, we're processing them. We were all outside doing a press conference. And this elderly woman walked by. She was in tears. She says, for so long, I was afraid to walk out of my own door, to go to the store, to get my mail out of my mailbox. And she was crying, but since you guys did this, now I feel I can live my life again. I had an aha moment right there. I said, this is why we do what we do, because people are afraid to walk out of their own door. And I said, that was a feel-good moment for me. I mean, maybe no one else, but everything came full circle. Again, as I said, this is why I'm in law enforcement, to protect people and to serve the public, fight violent crime, rid the streets of gangs. I was a street gang coordinator when I was in Tennessee. I worked in the drug task force. I was drug task force supervisor when I was in Philadelphia. They called it Killadelphia because it was so much gun violence, drugs and guns in Philadelphia. And I did that. I guess another part was we were addressing some of the gang problems in New Jersey and Philadelphia, and this crime, just seeing crime over and over and over again, the cycle of it. I mean, it's just overwhelming as a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, I would definitely say you've had a cool little career here, Dad. It's been exciting to watch, and I'm proud that you're still giving back to the law enforcement community in any way you can. So now that you're retired, what are you doing?
Well, I tell you, when I retired, I saw an advertisement. They had just opened the National Law Enforcement Museum. I'd been here years ago when they had the memorial. I was here for the dedication of the memorial, maybe early 2000s, I think it was. But now they opened a museum adjacent to the memorial. I says, let me just go down there and, out of curiosity, see what it's all about. Maybe I'll just attend some workshops or sessions or just whatever. And I came down here. I said, oh, man, this place is kind of nice. And so I walked past this room and I said, what is this? And it was Kevin Bretz, who later I met him, and Alan Davis. I said, what is this? He said, this is our use of force simulator. I said, oh, that's right in my swim lane. I said, because I was a chief firearms instructor for ATF. I've trained hundreds and hundreds of agents, and I've always been very proficient in firearms. I said, oh, I could do that. And I met then Bonnie Hayes at the time. She was a volunteer coordinator at the time. She was before our lovely Madison here. And I started here as a volunteer. I was teaching these use of force classes here about 6 months as a volunteer because I felt so passionate about this is my give back to the community, because I know I had a lot of information, training, and knowledge that I wanted to give back and maybe break down some of the preconceived notions and barriers that people have about law enforcement. And so they finally said, man, you're pretty good at this. We'd like to bring you on and hire you to come down here and do these classes. And you know the preparation that I put in to teach here at the museum. I do research and I study, and people have come to me and says, are you working on your PhD? Because I said, well, it's not that. It's an independent study, but I want to make sure people understand that this is not a video game. It is not for entertainment, because use of force can be also misuse of force. And that's what you're seeing a lot of that. And people just need to understand that officers have a challenge. So we give them a walk in the shoes experience here, and it's reality-based training. And people will have aha moments when they leave my class, because now I get it. Now I understand why officers do what they do, and they understand it. So they have an aha moment. That makes me feel I'm hitting certain points that people need to understand. People have come back and said, man, I was here 2 weeks ago. I brought my friend, colleagues, and I'm getting professionals, law enforcement. Officers said, look, we don't get this at our department. I've had FBI agents come in. I think FBI. I talk about all these things about mental health and some of the other challenges and that kind of thing. And some of the split-second decisions, and I get a lot of that. So I think they like me here. They're keeping me around. So I think I'm doing a pretty good job. But I really enjoy it because I'm passionate about it. I'm not hearing this for the money. I told Kevin Bress, I said, Kevin, I'll do this for free because I enjoy doing what I'm doing, because I know I'm reaching an audience that may not otherwise come in for this experience.
Well, I'm proud of you, Dad. So I know you've taught me a lot. You've taught my sisters and Mom a lot. Mom is so hyper aware because of you. And honestly, a lot of my male friends have benefited from your teaching and a lot of the hard conversations that their fathers may not have been prepared to have with them. You've had with too many of my friends. So thank you for that. And that's important, because I know in a lot of Black homes, there's not a male presence. So when you say, you do me one of your male friends, you say, Dad, this is my friend, so-and-so, would you talk? And I can tell when I'm talking to him, a young Black man, there's been a missing component in his life. So that's why I'm always encouraged when I can fill some of that gap in the case may be. And your friends know what my expectations of you are as my daughter, and the kind of influences I want you to be around, positive influences, away from the negative influence. And some of your friends have told you that. And when your dad looks so serious, whatever, because
I'm screening, I'm scanning, I'm making sure that you are around people who are going to pour into you in your life in a positive way and not take away from some of the things that I've tried to instill in you as my daughter.
Yeah, 1,000%. Well, this has been a great conversation, Dad. Thanks for talking with me.
Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate your energy, your effort. You know, you're my daughter that I know our relationship has always been one. It's been very, I don't have to dance around you, walk on eggshells. It's always been straightforward. You shoot, like a drink, straight, no chaser. Give it to me straight, no chaser. Bottom line up front, you always talk about that. Give it to me. I don't have to sugarcoat anything with you. Sweeten it up, soften it up. I give you the real, you give me the real back. And That's kind of how our relationship has always been. And I appreciate that. So when you asked me, does there any kind of restriction? I said, no, Courtney, just be your authentic self. Just do you as you always do you.
And you'll do you
and
too.
I'll do me. And we'll just have a conversation. And I appreciate you for coming in. And I love you so much.
Love you too, Dad.
All right. Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Icons, featuring Charles Humphrey and guest host Courtney Humphrey, Charles's daughter. We hope you found this conversation enlightening and will join us again for another edition of Icons, where we introduce listeners to incredible people working within law enforcement who have had a profound impact on the community. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.